Greetings to each and every last one of those very bright lights, light bearers, light spreaders, to open us up with a little bit of Freemasonry jargon. I am Brother Williams, PhD, and I'm glad to be able to talk about what I want to talk about, or speak on, lecture on, if you will, today. It is significance all throughout this fraternity's history. And I am very, very intrigued by it because of the different versions that seem to come from members when we're all in our own independent study and research, doing homework is the way I like to refer to it. And we're doing a such thing as just getting the idea of it, the best we can understand it. We hope to be able to convey, when we share our ideas about all of the information that we come across. Everybody's version is not identical. The story is still the same story, isn't it? And so to 26 years and counting as an initiated Freemason, an enlightened Mason, I really think it's really amazing having heard of numerous stories from different individuals in this Freemasonry fraternity, and tell it with a different spin each time, no fail about it, until what seems like we use this one instead. What seems like a trail towards a story it really does, after all, become a story. It has some shape to it. And no matter how many times I've heard it, all in one meeting, different meetings, from one to the next, over a certain period of time, it has never been the same. And so journeying united on this quest for knowledge with brethren, the craft, I am absolutely amazed. And that is the very reason why I want to talk about what I chose to share today. That trail. It's where it all begins. And as it broadens or widens, all of what probably is really or presumably is solid information regarding the story starts to expound in the philosophy or in the framework that we're looking at it from. And to me, all that says is that there is a lot to be talked about when we talk about Freemasonry. That trail gets, just like you'll see here, it gets thinner and thinner as it's built upon or as we go along. So again, on that note, I really am glad that all who have been able to attend here have been, because you really are a big part of why this is enjoyable. A very big part of why it's enjoyable. Might as well place the date somewhere while I'm at it. So what I chose to talk about, it interests me, is the publication history, not even. We're going to get into that earlier or later on. I and some other brethren and sisters, when we meet, what is the date? Maybe it's around the 18th of this month. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I have the RSVP. And it is this month, a little bit later towards the end of the month. But I do want to talk about the 1723 Book of Constitutions, since I did some research on it, and I've been taking notes on it for months, several months. This year, and I think some of 2023. But this 1723, 18th century Book of Constitutions for Freemasonry to be used, or to be handled as if it is for use in lodges. It is a popular topic in the fraternity. And Solomon, I'm enrolled as a student in the Solomon VLE under the United Grand Lodge of England. And it's been talked about, and you can always go on social media and look it up in YouTube's search bar. After you've put in maybe UGLE or something of that context, maybe you could just put Solomon Live in there itself, and it might bring you to the United Grand Lodge of England channel, or maybe directly to it. But I've listened to it, Take notes on it. I've had questions, and I still do. And my intent to not be so direct and specifically about the 1723 Book of Constitutions, specifically, rather lots of the scenery, if you will. That's the imagery when you're listening to experienced members of the fraternity for a long while talk about the Book of Constitutions. That's the impact of it. Of course, it's what is making it interesting for us to raise in discussion, right? As a disclaimer here, brethren and sisters, I don't recommend interpreting this lecture as a representation of Freemasonry or its stance on anything, be it religion, politics, ethics, economics, or whatever it might be. As far as this lecture is concerned, that means this is my opinion. Of course, we're researchers. We're academic investigators. But we can't ever avoid in the Western world the education platform in general. So it's taking a combination of my character and my intelligence to sort of construct this type of engagement or interaction, if you will, so that it has a little bit of a spin or a sprinkle on it that sort of derives it all from a complete recital of information that is online. Therefore, I personally don't see it outside of my own opinion, because I'm going to explain this in the way that I understand it, and it's really something I'm excited to do, because I really like to get in the middle of sentences and between the lines that are on paper to make sure I understand how the information relates to me mentally, spiritually, physically, or socially. And it doesn't have to be every last one of them, the first time around. But what gets me with what I studied and looked up to prepare for the meeting that is coming up this month, which is going to be about the publication history of the Book of Constitutions, is that I've not seen anywhere, maybe I have a picture of it. I've not seen anywhere in the data where it does not sort of just stand very clear to me in a way that a couple of things here, in a way that just kind of eases my curiosity, if you will. First, I'm going to show how I'm going to identify myself to relevancy and interest in the 1723 Book of Constitutions. I am a member of the Quartul Coronati, a large 2076 correspondence circle. which is the world premier Masonic Lodge of Research in London, and it is the first research lodge, essentially from whence all other research lodges have come. But aside from that, now that that's out of the way, what we want to look at is a picture I found looking on the website, our official website, or the QC 2076 webpage, and it's an image of the 1723 Book of Constitutions. You see, and what it says in one way, down in the caption, if you will, just underneath the image, it says inventing the future, right? The 1723 Constitutions, right? Please visit, right? And there it is, a nice image of it right there. But here it says inventing the future. Now what we're going to talk about later on this month is the history, the publication history of the Book of Constitutions. And I'm not going to go into history philosophically. I'm going to go in the future philosophically, because that's what it says, right? Furthermore, I'm not going to copy the lecture topic of my own superiority and brother, and really talk about the publication history of the 1723 Book of Constitutions, which is all about the backstage, if you will, scenery, to the development, processing, production of the Book of Constitutions and the history of it. But when I was looking at the publication history, what I got out of it compelled me to want to talk about the book with regard to the publication, and where I understand it in a historical context, because that's going to lead me into whatever question I'm searching to raise at the meeting. It's going to have a lot to do with something that I'm baffled about. And there are reasons why. The genesis of the 1723 Book of Constitutions, to me, is not the same as the publication history. To me, the publication history, which is the first three words of the title of this lecture upcoming. So the way I interpret it is that this is a look in at the trial and error, perhaps, of processing this work. It is not a direct delve into the book or the work itself, the constitutions themselves. Rather, a delve into the work, the development of it, and looking at that framework from whence that process comes from, right? Comes. Now, it's possible, knowing me, that that's not the way it's intended by our brother, our superiority, and who was going to give the lecture. Knowing me, I just went way in so deep, but I'm very comfortable with doing that all the time, every time, because that secures, me, since there is, a very high chance in the fraternity when we're going over things that are relevant or pertinent to us individually as Masons. And that will probably be very, very close to one another when we explain it in philosophy. Yeah. So, to increase the chance that I'm going to interpret or explain it, unique enough so that it doesn't sound like I'm, almost somebody else. I started into it understanding the basis first. It was produced, and so I started right there instead of the publication history. This is a little bit earlier than publication when we're in the production stage, right? So it was produced at the Grand Lodge on January 1723. And approved for the use of lodges. The cover, front page, rather, of the Daily Journal, there it is, after it's complete. Very popular. Instantly. And this is formally established in London. The significance in the anniversary of its establishment extends beyond Freemasonry. Well, and understand that. I can comprehend that because, when we're talking about the development of it, we are definitely talking about more than the 1723 Book of Constitutions. There's lots of other entities that come into the picture. And those relations we think about in Freemasonry get very broad in scope, sociologically. They get very macro-sociological, because these other entities are not individuals who are necessarily Freemasons, who come into play as the story goes along, or as the story is told. There are individuals who play a role in the production as well as the success of this Book of Constitutions, whom are not, were not, never were, never became members of the fraternity, right? Some of them were Freemasons, and then when this thing starts to spawn, if you will, they become Freemasons then. It contributed to enthusiasm for written constitutions in France, right? Smaller countries even, such as Corsica, and there are other ones, Pitcairn, as well as the United States. James Anderson is the author of the 1723 Book of Constitutions. And there has been a piece written on the Book of Constitutions by James, not James Anderson, Andrew Prescott. With regard to the publishers, those who are the publishers for the Ars Coronatorum, members of the Quatuor Coronati, Lodge number 2076, Correspondence Circle, London, all familiar with the Ars Coronatorum, annual transaction. We're familiar with that. It was highly contentious, this written work of Andrew Prescott, who wrote about the Ars Coronatorum publishers. It led to one of the first public controversies involving the new Grand Lodge, the piece he wrote, or has written. And so there are some things that I thought about what we've possibly wrote or written that would do such, right? And this isn't that I'm oblivious. The questions are redundant. Over a period of study on these constitutions, in my opinion, I mean, there's a set or standard that just comes along with Inquisition that I don't think is going to change, right? Unless the entire Book of Constitutions changes. Until then, not only redundant, but they're also rhetorical, in my opinion. So it's not that I'm oblivious as to why these are done, because I'm aware of strategy. I'm aware of talent. I'm aware of skill, right? We're not strangers per se as a fraternity to the idea of competition or opposition or rejection, right? Or betrayal in our own personal circumstance. We are very familiar with those experiences as Masons. It happens all the time, right? So it led to one of the first public controversies. Wow, it was not even private. Something that only Freemasons can get a hold of or know since it ever occurred, to be something that is totally related or concerned with the lodges. Rather, it's become controversial publicly. Where in the world do we go with that? That's a never-ending journey I'm sure it could be very entertaining along the way. But my imagery takes me, since it was lectured on the Solomon of VLE some time ago, I was able to attend that. For one thing, this is the 18th century and we're in the 21st century. We've upgraded a lot technology-wise, transportation, electricity, technology, communication, and networking. My imagery, paints the picture of a thriving globe that looks like such with my naked eye today in the 21st century. But they're not identical. There are the landmarks that's all important to keep up with and to regard for those of us who are really appreciative of history, at least. So I think in public, wow, there's a lot Freemasons don't discuss in the lodge, let alone in public. What in the world do we do with something so important of a document as the 1723 Book of Constitutions that has come to mind in the mind of Andrew Prescott? He's produced a written work all about not the 1723 Book of Constitutions, the publishers of the Ars Coronatorum. The Ars Coronatorum. That's so correlated with the Book of Constitutions, right? And what it's essentially to be used for, what it is produced for. And then it's published to make sure that it's reinforcing that purpose. This purpose that James Anderson has, right? It's going forward, let's say, in time here. It's going out there. And it's an impactful thing. My imagination says it's impacting Freemasons in the lodges. It's impacting lodges. In Freemasonry, it's impacting Freemasonry. Right? In this organization, it is impacting this organization. In this brotherhood, it is impacting this brotherhood. But that's not the end of it, is it? There are those who are not in Freemasonry who are impacted by it. And you can't disagree, throw it out the window, because we have morals and principles and tenets and virtues that connect us in our own respective communities. That is a fact. According to us, brethren of the craft, we would not exist in this organization if we did not have that connection with our respective communities. Right? It would defeat the purpose for going through the degrees of Freemasonry. Right? And that's my opinion. From the booksellers and publishers who saw the book as their property, I ask a question: were all of them, or each of them rather, Freemasons? Or some of them not? who as well as a Freemason, said, well, that book's for me. This 1723 Book of Constitutions, well, this is something it's got my name written all over it. I can see it. Wow, in the lodges, well, we as Freemasons, of course, it's a welcome book. We obviously need it, whether we personally agree with it or not. So it's something that's to benefit and it'll be effective throughout the entire lodge, right? So there are those who have this sort of passion for it and want it as a personal property. And in my eye, I see it in Freemasonry as a part of our structure, right? So there is the pertinence that this book has that I'm intrigued about, as well as the value of it, right? There's this sort of manual slash philosophic tool that it starts to resemble in symbolism or in a reflective way for me, rather than an instrument, which might be okay to look at it that way, as an instrument, something that will eventually or periodically, more so in the referencing for specific cases, instances, occurrences, recurring events, right? Situations under certain and very specific conditions, a must have, a must open, just like the VSL, right? At some point in time, I could see it that way and look at it more like an instrument, pretty much from ritual, when we're learning symbolism of the working tools in the 3 degrees of Freemasonry, in the Blue Lodge or Craft Lodge. I can see it that way. But let's look at beyond the 3 degrees, and let's look at beyond just the lodge, for the sake of, including the public, including society at large, for the simple fact that there are some key role players or persons who to be of recognized status or quality in this type of dialogue. When we are talking about a publication like the Book of Constitutions, in other words, some of them were Masons, maybe they weren't, but the essence of it, the constitutions, the publication of them as they are, as they stand, for use in the lodges, makes those people who weren't Freemasons still do recognition just as much. Again, as I mentioned early on, there have been persons, individuals who were not Freemasons when they began to play a role, to facilitate this goal, to play a part of accomplishing this goal that we have needed in the lodges for the sake of our lodges, right? And once they began that endeavor, between then and the end of it, they had become Freemasons. And so I think of it more looking at publication from the angle of publication about it, and not from the angle about the constitutions, what's in the book. But again, the development of this entire thing, this this idea that there's the need for this, and the preparation for it, building the connections, right? And the action, putting it all into action. And, ultimately, from the 18th century to the 21st century and counting, the maintenance of it. It's more of a tool, almost to me, than an instrument. And I don't think they're the same. An instrument, it's not of any essence, no matter what its appearance or its texture or its color or its size or its shape or its aroma, fragrance, its scent of it. No matter what that is, unless it is physically, manually handled, it plays no appeal upon the human mind or psyche, ego, perception, ability, right? Versus a tool, whether you're going to manually use it or not, it has already been created to be used. And let's say an example, we'll use the whiteboard. Let's say an example. We've got on one hand a tool, and on the other hand we've got an instrument. A tool such as a hammer or a wrench, and an instrument such as a trumpet, or let's say a guitar. This is an instrument, right? Strings, these two. And this is a tool. Well, it takes a lot more intelligence to use or to make use of, even in philosophy, in Freemasonry, any instruments, right? Because you've got to manually handle them. Not at all. That's not the reason. It's not that. It's because along with handling them, you've got to be very cognitive. You have, in other words, to have some componental knowledge. You have to have been trained on basics knowledge. You have to have got some knowledge. But you, as you develop as a musician, you've got to have a good memory. And so an instrument, when it comes to memory, it plays a lot on the psyche. Whereas a tool, well, sure, you've got to be cognitive, but listen at the way we'll handle that. Oh, of course, sure, cognitive, no problem. I keep moving, right? Absolutely. And why so? In addition to having knowledge about how to use it, because when it comes to memory, well down the road of philosophy before we reach the psych platform, if you will, or that's a curriculum. We don't need to remember how to use a tool as we grow more and more knowledgeable of how to use a tool. It's the same tool, and it's meant to be used for the same purpose every single time. We don't have to pluck a hammer, though we can if we had to, because we can pluck a guitar like Bruce Springsteen, for example, right? Or Led Zeppelin, right? Or Tracy Chapman, or Alicia Keys, right? or Lady Gaga. You know, when you're learning a new song, you've got to pluck those strings in a different order than the song that you played. You've already learned it and enjoyed it for years, right? You've got to understand there's a different choreography, so to speak. When you have to use an instrument, you have to put it into work and use it. And your memory has to stay sharp in order to do that. To use a hammer, which is a tool, you don't have to continually sharpen your memory on how to use a hammer. Right? So you're going to always use a hammer to nail something or pull a nail out of something, to hit on something. But every song you're going to play on a guitar or with a trumpet, you can't hit the same notes at the same time in the same places as you do on a different song. Right? So to me, a tool, an instrument are very, very, very different when it comes to the psyche and how much concentration it takes to properly use each one of them. And so from what I've seen and what I've learned and understand here, in my opinion, the 1723 Book of Constitutions is more now like a tool to me than an instrument. Right? And people like to talk about the working tools. Of course, the working tools is very self-explanatory, but people like to talk about the working tools as if they're instruments. Because they are assuming when we talk about speculative masonry and we're talking about symbolism of the working tools of the stonemasons, that word symbolism is a very a transparent word. And it, again, sorts of like what's happened with this Book of Constitutions. You've had, people from the booksellers and the publishers who saw the book as their property. They found it to be something, personally symbolic. And individually as a mason, each one of us are going to know this to be something personal for us, but we also are united in this quest for knowledge in Freemasonry. We're a unit of brotherhood nonetheless. And so we're sharing this sublime experience when we're talking about things that exist and have existed for centuries. We are talking about them not just in the ways that they're personal. We are also Freemasons in Freemasonry who are practicing them according to Freemasonry. So we're sort of reinforcing the belief that it is something personal, but to continue to foster that belief, we are united with one another, and that's a difference. That's a distinct difference in how we approach it, and that goes into a different direction altogether. And who knows, if there is a point of return to it or not, because, well, if you get a room of Freemasons and the same room with non-Freemasons, and we talk about something that is, such as rather the 1723 Book of Constitutions, who knows when this discussion will ever come to an end? Who knows, how controversial it could become? Because we, when it comes to what is in the lodges, are reserved outside of the lodges with regard to how much we disclose, right? In public, well, I beg to differ, because for every Mason, there's a point in time, such as childhood, when none of us were Masons, and what we were public citizens, right? Juvenile, minor, and adult, which we must be of adult age to become a member of the lodge in the first place. But we've all experienced public life, you know, per se. So I think of it more as like a manual / philosophic tool that just does not need memory over and over and over, because we have it in the lodge for use in the lodges. Whether they've got it in public or everywhere else they want it, they think it's theirs. We don't, in the lodge, take it as our own, right? It's like the VSL. None of us can say the VSL is our property. And I feel that same respect toward the 1723 Book of Constitutions, right? But in public, what do you do with it? You think it's yours. Well, where are you going to make use of it at? In reality, besides putting it in your library or somewhere in your home, where will you make use of it at? Where will you build a network at besides at Freemasonry? Besides the lodge? That's a question I would ask. And it might be a very valid answer, legitimate answer. But I think that because that is the case, that this Book of Constitutions, it was not just a beautiful piece of work. It was not just beautiful. That's one thing. Also, it could consolidate a framework of Masonic principles. That's the essentialism, in my opinion, for producing it for the lodge, for use in lodges. And I think it was successful, and it still is. And, of course, right? I also think that the structure could have a way with anyone, essentially. So that it is constitutions, and what constitutions are generally, of course, it's possible anybody could find it very, very beautiful. Organization was brought to order as a result of it. Cause and effect. It brought organization to order. I don't think that's the same again. It's much like an instrument and a tool. Organization, of course, we want to go ahead and say that it is in order. But when you've really got things in order, you've got appropriations, right? The points of appropriation, in my opinion, is not just when there's a need to transform something completely to something else, right? That is an appropriate method, right? Sometimes just steps are appropriate and they suffice, an entire method, because the scale is small. It does not take as much work as if it was a large scale of a change unnecessary or an organization, right? So when you do consolidate over time, that bulk you once were handling is a little smaller, and your space is a lot larger, right? That's so it's the points of consolidation is to make space, so to speak, right? To make sense, to be logical, right? More logical. It's for more logic, right? So there's a time in organization, since it is organized, more so than when there is disorganization or things that are unorganized, in my opinion, just sort of here, by the way, because they're the same either way, but just for the sake of thinking outside the box, if you will, with this particular lecture, when things are organized, there's more of the perception of things that sort of compels the need to have order. It's when you've got a clean dining room table, you've got a clean tablecloth, and it's all set up on Valentine's Day for your love. You're more prone to enjoy Valentine's Day the way you've scheduled it, aren't you? Versus if it's still the same Valentine's Day, and that same old table, it's got dirty dishes over it and have been for the past week, and you want to take your love to the dinner table and enjoy Valentine's Day. What do you think is going to happen when it's not all up to what you think? Maybe you don't have a problem with the way it is, but are you not in a relationship and you're not telepathic? I'm sorry, you're not telepathic, right? Let's settle for enthusiastic or optimistic, right? Maybe you're compulsive, maybe you're obsessed, but you're not telepathic, okay? Your physiology is not complementing your misperceptions. Your energy is slowly depleting. Sooner or later, you're going to experience exhaustion, and it's not healthy. You don't want to do that on a regular basis, right? So ethically, let's say, when something is organized, there is more of a need to and the ability, as well as the willingness, to implement order, right? To exercise it. Although I do understand unorganized things, disorganization, it is just as important as order is in reality. And there are ways to find that there is order in disorder. There are ways. But in this level of lecture and Masonic philosophy, I think I'm going to go ahead and stick with the example for Valentine's Day, and say, if there is a dining table that's for me and my love, for me hire one, I'm single, but if I have my love and it's a Valentine's Day occasion here, and the table's got dirty dishes all over it, I'm not going to set it up for us as is on this day, for whatever it is, right, that we are going to celebrate together as one. I'm not going to deem it satisfactory, right? So on the one hand, that is there. On the other hand, if the table does not have dirty dishes all over it, it's well set up, candles are there, roses, what have you, I'm more confident about the situation, the occasion, and how we're going to thrive from this experience we share over the next year to the next one. Or perhaps how we've thrived from the past one, And so, in my opinion, organization was brought to order. They're not the same. Literally, they're two different vocabulary words, right? Some of us are really, really, really obsessed about being politically correct, right? And I'm not really shocked out about it. I consolidate and talk where I'm already proficient at, and then take those unnecessary jabs at the human psyche or intelligence. I'll take it for granted that I can start over again, do it over. If at first there's a saying, if at first you don't succeed, you can always try again. Try again, and then I say, well, you can always you can change how you've done something, but you cannot go back where you were and redo what you first did. You cannot change your first choice. You can change your method. You can change your regime. You can change your approach, right? Modify your technique. I think that's the most you can do. When we talk about development constructively, you can't redo something. If you've done a Valentine's Day on a messy table, and next Valentine's Day you do it on a clean table, it's not going to erase from your memory what the last one was like. You know, that 50% of you, that's half of the mate, you've got to reckon with. So it's best to not do it everywhere. Things that aren't organized are better off placed in the hands or in the domains of people like us who know how to make sense of them, who know how to instill the order, and are on the same scale in terms of networking as the mass population is in the entire universe. But we are consolidated, if you will, into a fraternity as human beings. Therefore, these tools we make more efficient use of with regard to speculative masonry and looking into this in a philosophy that is fostering self improvement. Right? This is very profound, brethren and sisters. This is not emulated outside of the fraternity in public in general, in your grocery stores or in your cafes or your coffee pubs, etc. There is nobody who is doing what we do, right? With the very same alphabetic chart and the same method of combinations of letters to make words, and just repeat them in different appropriations with, human beings who are also using them as well and have been also incorporating them from place to place, right? We all are working in an interconnected world, aren't we? And so this is very profound in its own right. So I think that organization was brought to order much as society is by history in Freemasonry, with the constitutions. The same way history has a way of putting in order the chaotic places in the world, as well as the very peaceful, tranquil places in the world, because history is not really identifying anything that is in the world. It's philosophy. It's painting a dramatic or theatrical version of what is happening in reality, so to speak, right? And I think that's what the 1723 Book of Constitutions is doing and does for the lodges, right? What is grabbing, moreover, is that the publications, production of the Book of Constitutions in story about production of it shows that the creation of a new Grand Lodge was by no means uncontroversial, right? So the written work of Andrew Prescott led to a lot of controversy. It led to one of the first public controversies involving the new Grand Lodge, right? But the publications production, not just a single author's production, or a written work about it, or about the Grand Lodge in general. Of the Book of Constitutions, hear me good on this. In story, let me say it again. What was grabbing is that the publication's production. Maybe you look at it. Let me give you maybe a keyword or a signpost here. This book here, right? Just let's look at it in that lame term. What's grabbing is that the publication's production, so it's reflective, right? There really is no point to make here, just to mention it. The publication's production of the Book of Constitutions in story about production of it. Something like a reflection of it, or review process or session about it in regard to publication of it post its production, shows to me that the creation of a new Grand Lodge, which was, controversial around the time Andrew Prescott had written a work about the publishers for the Ars Coronatorum. Again, that the creation of a new Grand Lodge was by no means uncontroversial. So, a follow-up again on what transpired from Andrew Prescott's written work, right? He's just one person, one gentleman. And you've got the publication's production of the book in story, right? About production of it. This is because it's going all around, not just in Freemasonry. You've had people, as we talked about, opening the lecture up, who've played a role in the successful delivery of the 1723 Book of Constitutions into the lodges, who were not Freemasons, right? And very happy in their own walk of life with what it is they do, right? Very significant. But yeah, so this thing is, I'm intrigued looking at it from this perspective. I typically would have looked around, thought about, maybe contemplated the 1723 Book of Constitutions. I've heard lecture, more than a few lectures about it, right? From Grand Masters in the Grand Lodge of England, the United Grand Lodge of England, excuse me, right? But later on this month, it is to be raised to a discussion among us superior idean brothers. And we're going to be talking about the publication history of it. And I've never thought to look at it from that perspective whatsoever. And so having this opportunity to research and not go with, well, what am I going to put in? Type of 1723 Book of Constitutions used for lodges, right? Something similar to that. Keywords, United Grand Lodge of England, right? That's what we've done. We've not gone to publication history and of the 1723 Book of Constitutions. Personally, I would never thought to do it. And so there were key figures who objected to the political and social baggage, adjectives there, I presume, as it is said, as it is written, of the new Grand Lodge. So again, we've already identified key figures, or we've established the idea of there being individuals who have played a role, a very important role, a very professional role, a very distinguished role in this accomplishment, right? Who were not Freemasons. We've already talked about, we've mentioned it a number of times now, right? For the minutes, of course, we've mentioned it numerous times, right? And again, as well, not all of them were Freemasons. And what significance there is to that is that of them who weren't embarking on this journey, some of them before the end of the project were Freemasons, right? Or post publication became Freemasons, right? So at the end of the day, suffice there were key figures who objected to the political and social baggage of the new Grand Lodge. Whether that's because some of them were already were being inspired by being involved, those being the ones eventually did become Freemasons and were not before, and those working alongside them, if you would, so to speak, who were Freemasons and kept it that way. So this is of pertinence because an attack was launched ferociously on the new constitutions, and that their author, right, James Anderson. A ferocious attack was launched. This thing became very controversial. It's a burning flame from the flicker that Andrew Prescott is given credit for, metaphorically. So there's a sort of skepticism because of its length, I suppose, exceeding what the number of ordinary sermons were. Obviously, that they were created with the intent of one imagination, and that's the author. So it seems that there's not been a visual of Freemasons from the lodges all excited about this publication, the 1723 Book of Constitutions. A little bit, maybe you could just feel the anxiety of those who were not involved, not interested in being involved in this fraternity, but hearing how it's getting out, because there are those who are playing a role in making the publication of it a success, who are not Freemasons and are constituents in their own various directions, right? The words are getting out. It's being promoted, right? Over the shelf as a publication. Through the publishing, it's being popularized in its own respective domains, right? The lodges, are really, it's true finds, if you knew what I mean. Let's look at here about this. Imagination. We've talked about psych and instruments and tools, and we drew a little bit on the whiteboard. And so, yeah, it's not, in my opinion, beyond possibility. That a lot of it is just the impression that Freemasonry has in this world, across the globe. It is so many people's desire to argue it, to debate it, to attempt to rebut Freemasonry. And all the while, in reality, we are good men made better. And that goes with the golden seal, the seal of authenticity. So he offers print-offs to the general censure of the fraternity, copies. So there's not the 1723 Book of Constitutions sitting in one place, for example, like the Statue of Liberty. And if whoever is interested in visiting, you've got to come from wherever you are to where the Statue of Liberty is. We don't have a Statue of Liberty in every country, right? That type of thing. Not like military bases, where there are bases all around the world for each branch of the armed forces, right? It's not like the Statue of Liberty, where there's only one copy of the Book of Constitutions, and we've all got to voyage to it, right? Or mecca to it, right? He offers print-offs to the general censure of the fraternity. So there's to be one, like the VSL. There's to be one in the lodges. I mean, I don't think the claim of a scam is greater lying anywhere more than elsewhere. And that being away outside of the lodges regarding this, concerning publication, etc. Because it is thought to be created in interest of just him. That cuts lots of possibilities out. To think that it's just him, and it's got a title like Book of Constitutions for use in the lodges, to think he's going to be able to go around and see every lodge from his Grand Lodge jurisdiction. He's going to be able to go and visit not just every Grand Lodge jurisdiction that exists across the globe, and just take this book around and have at it. It sounds that way. It's compared by funding as to the existing constitution and what rate of distribution or coverage with regard to distribution it was worth over time. It was at the 2S6D and charged for the new constitutions, thought to be a fraction of the price. Those who wanted to compete with it, who opposed this, and drew up versions of the Book of Constitutions for the lodges, for use in the lodges, after this one, to sort of try again to debunk it, right? Did those literary works for a portion of the price this Book of Constitutions by Brother Anderson, or Mr. Anderson. I don't know off the top of my head, I can't remember if he's a Freemason or not, but after he's done this, people have come out with versions of Book of Constitutions for use in the lodges. And they've tried to compete based on funding the project. They funded the project or afforded it, made it affordable at less than what he had it at. right? In terms of funding, they were willing to give it 50% off or put it on a clearance shelf, right? Have a sale about it, right? Just to make sure they would get something out there, and he doesn't, right? So it's challenged. The old constitutions competes at 25 less, right? James Robertson's one name upgraded the paper quality as well. So the paper quality that the 1723 Book of Constitutions is printed on is competed with as well, right? So, James Roberts does one. He's one of the most prolific trade publishers in London, by the way. But in challenge, these other versions we just talked about, mentioned, that were not going to be at the two. It was I think James Anderson, the author, had it at the way they write their funding characters. There's a 2S. Let me write on the whiteboard. It was this 2S 6D. Now, when they wanted to compete with this, they wanted, or actually they did, offer it, make it available for better or for worse, 1% less than what that was. Also, they improved the paper quality of those books. So what his paper quality was just wouldn't cut it. They're going with a better paper quality. Mind you, at this time, when we look here in the 21st century on the history of paper, when paper was created, right? Imagine in the 18th century what they were thinking about paper and the quality of it. I can erase this. They were saying, well, we're going to do about that book. Here's a book, and it's going to cost you this much less than what that one costs you. Plus, the paper quality is much better, right? Some might call those shenanigans. I'm not going to entertain it one way or the other. But those are some of the antics, if you will, that have been recorded, and we've access to this story. James Robert upgraded paper quality, claims it was printed without permission of Grand Lodge. James Anderson's Book of Constitutions. So a ferocious attack was launched on the Constitutions and its author. Right? Why not just take it all out on the publishers and say, well, you published it. It's not about what he wrote. It's not about his book. It's not about lodges. It's not about Freemasonry. It would not be about anything if you've not published it for my sake. You're the one who's got it out there. You're supporting it. He's an author in his own right. He can always be an author. But if you don't publish those works, we don't have to feel that, right? Sort of thing. Why not go after the publishers? Blame the publishers. I don't wish that upon them. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want you to interpret that way. But we've got to see as Masons, essential use for publishing things that pertain to how the lodges are running, especially when we're talking about the Quatuor Coronati Lodge number 2076 correspondence circle, where there is the Ars Coronatorum, where the publication of the 1723 Book of Constitutions becomes very bright and very beautiful for us Freemasons, right? So did this comparison / competition influence the stance of the church opposition to Freemasonry is another question I want to ask, because we know that has been happening before this period, right? In civilization and in history. But did this, because the same opposition exists today between, it, to me, I don't entertain it. I try my best to, obscure, just get away from controversial platforms or talk about public square. I like to be very sophisticated, distinguished, just keep it simple, yeah, and respectful and professional. But did this comparison or competition influence the stance of the church opposition to Freemasonry, possibly filling in a supposed role missed by the Masonic Lodge, seeing itself as the guardian of the traditions of the craft, right? We, with the craft that we learned in Freemasonry in the lodges, from the first to the 33rd degree, I will agree it's going to go very hands down with us first, or, if we were to debate this with someone who's not a Freemason, as being something that is totally for Freemasons, and in that an individual Mason, right, that gives each Mason a happiness or satisfaction about the results of becoming a part of a Freemasonic lodge in his own personal walk in life, right? In his own spiritual journey, right? That validates whatever it is validating for him. That Freemasonry, nor any lodge I'm aware of, requires him to disclose to the lodge, right? So, there's this sort of a thing that this is something that we're the guardians of, these constitutions, us, and that being Freemasons. And I'm not sure, but I want to ask, is the competition or comparison something that influenced the stance of the church opposition, as well as other things have, right? Because I don't know. But we get to the goose and the gridiron, the Masonic Lodge, we talk about St. Paul's Cathedral. We're all talking about the church then, aren't we? The guardians of the traditions of the craft, we say, all right, at least I feel that way, we're the guardians. I don't mean we're the owners of it. I don't even mean, we have anything to do with it, that it's relevant or pertinent at all. And frankly, that's because that level or value of dialogue doesn't ever come to substance. Or if that is the tone of discussion or conversation I'm in with any human being, because I'm a Freemason and I respect the fraternity and the way that the way our gentle craft is. Yeah. So I am one who's, for like, it's totally legitimate without any mark to look for, that we think, if we want to think that way, of ourselves as the guardians of the traditions of the craft. I don't think that's implying that we say we're the owners of the traditions of the craft, or that those traditions of the craft belong to us. I don't think that's what a guardian's role is or disposition is, right? Rather, we are way off in the distance, maybe. And in the time of need, we come to instantly, to rescue, right? To relief, as we know is one of our tenets, along with brotherly love and truth, is relief, right? I think that's more along the lines of all attributes of a guardian. But what's interesting to me is, moreover, that the Cook manuscript of the old charges was to work out how far errors had entered into the history and chronology of the old charges, rather than into the future to some extent. And I want to share the picture, the image again that I shared early on, because that's my point here. On our website, the Kotor Coronati Lodge number 2076, the premier lodge of Masonic research, which I'm a member in the correspondence circle, it specifically says here, right underneath the image of the Book of Constitutions, and I'm going to point out right there, it says, and of course this is a social media, this is an algorithm type of a fancy decor, if you will. Please visit Inventing the Future, the 1723 Constitutions. And so this should have the future in perspective, right? Or in a prospective sort of consciousness, right? A circuitry that concerns itself with what's the word? A psychotomic kind of circuitry, if you will, right? A sort of psychic atomic circuitry. It should, in my opinion, because all I've heard in what I've researched and what I've investigated is all historic. Here comes the 1723 Book of Constitutions in the 18th century, and then it's being competed with the old charges, the old constitutions. And all the while, the occasion for this is inventing the future, right? So I suggest we review from looking, we review its future in optimism, because not much has been done in light of the future with this this issue, and let the pessimism just take a break, because we're not telepathic. If the book's no good, in time it will show to be no good. We in the lodges will be the first of humanity to hands-on manually start to handle it for what it's worth, right? Everybody's out in economics and they're all over the place. They're all into governments and they're all into religion and everything, as well as this organization, so to speak, right? But it's going to inevitably be what it's meant to be. It's not going to be more than what the producer or the author of it has created, from the ground up or from the nucleus to the outer shell of it. No matter what you do, no matter how many copies you distribute, no matter what cost they are, it as a work is not going to escape its own measure, the measure that is instilled in it, right? So the Cook manuscript was of the old charges, and it was to work out how far errors had entered into the history and the chronology of the old charges, how much had entered, of course, because of the Book of Constitutions that Anderson has authored, rather than into the future. So more about how it has done something or affected the old charges rather than how it's affected the future has been the concentration, right? To some extent, in my opinion. And, to get a better idea or perhaps appreciation for it, I suggest we look at it, in like a type of psychoatomic circuitry. Think outside the box, say, a step around a little bit, an attack against the Grand Lodge, accuse lodges of indulging in such practices as sodomy and masturbation. All this ad hominems coming in, slander, defamation of character, degradation, belittling, the piece of 18th century erotica ran through 3 editions in a week. That's how dedicated to opposing it the competition has been. Criticism took weight in one of the Grand Lodge's meetings. So it's festered before. It's been known to fester and leak, so to speak, into the lodge, a lodge. It slipped into the lodge, is the way I put it. If it was up to me, I'd put it that way. It slipped in. But that's how much of a cloud there is about it. These clashes have prompted Grand Lodge to appoint a secretary. So why there's a secretary now in the Grand Lodge? It's because of this controversy and this bickering, so to speak. And start to keep minutes of its meetings in June of 1723. So we'll get minutes, right? Richard Ford evidently introduced Anderson to the Book of Constitutions project and said, hey, this is what you do with those old charges. If you want to do something with them and something is going to be to the good of the order for the lodges or for Freemasonry, well, check this out, mate, right? Hook, as publisher, had John Sinex join him, and his name appears first on the title page. So they've worked around, and this is a very important piece of literature, isn't it? Very, very attractive, and our type of government is not a surprise. The 1723 was published by the Anderson's version, that is, of the 1723, was published by the Masonic Service Association of North America, right? According to the Squire magazine. And I would not second guess that, because I'm also a member of the Masonic Service Association of North America. And that is what we do. That association does publish, if nothing else. So, you've a lot of contributions have been made towards the dedication alone. It's a lot of shenanigans, If an eye was for an eye and a tooth was for a tooth, we could call them tactics or antics or shenanigans. But I'm still really glad that we have it. And we're in an age in the 21st century where controversy still exists, lots of it, but I doubt it's any different than it always has been, because I personally, and as a grandmaster, am not inclined or compelled towards controversial groups of Freemasons, or any chapters for that matter. I like to sit in the intellectual association, do what I came to do, keep me word, don't take on more than I can handle or deliver, and treat no one in a way I don't want to be treated. Our golden rule. And with that, we meet upon the level of equality. We act upon the plumb of uprightness, and we part upon the square of virtues. And I thank you for tuning in or attending this lecture. I see you again. Who knows? I myself personally am presenting a lecture, the first one of the 8 lecture series on the Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness, where it talks about the psychoatomic circuit is the 8th circuit, and we will understand more about it. And if you take notes on this lecture, you will get a little more understanding on what that had to do with this particular lecture, or my opinion on why it's what it is. And it's going to be from July 8th, the Monday after the 4th week, the week of Independence Day, so we don't inconvenience anyone with a lecture in a time like the week of the 4th of July, in North America. So much like an academic curriculum, I started the 8 lecture seminar, the 8 lecture series is scheduled to go get underway the following Monday of Independence Day on the 8th, right? And it will be one lecture given each week until we cover the 8 circuits, instead of giving one lecture and covering all 8 circuits in one lecture, right? A lot more of an opportunity I have created as Grandmaster to improve proficiency and leadership skills and the ability to set an example and influence positive action, sort of here forge more fellowship and connecting with brethren and sisters. Because in one lecture was not enough time to do that. During the lecture is not at all the time even to build any connections, right? This is something that's going to require undivided attention, obviously, and so there's the expanding of this original idea I had, which was just to do a lecture on the 8 circuits of consciousness, and that is to do one circuit at a time in a lecture, so that we really get down into the circuit and not the model of Leary of the 8 circuits of consciousness, without having gotten our feet wet first, at least, to understand what the framework is, right? So that we can delve deeper when we do encounter a new foundation, right? So it is going to get underway July 8th, and it will adjourn or close on the 26th of August, 2024. And in the meantime, I can't say I'm going to be doing a lecture or not. It's going to be some more impulsive or spontaneous. right here, right now, I don't know. But I will be attending meetings, and there I might see you, right? If you're able to make it. Yeah, and if nothing changes, it's all God's will. I plan to be there. I hope I'm able to be there. I am willing. And so, with that said, I enjoyed it, and I'll see you later. Hail.